My name's Kevin. I'm 36 and I teach English at a public high school. If you ask me what I want out of life, I'd tell you straight up. I'm not ambitious. I never cared about fancy cars or big houses. I just wanted something steady, something kind. A simple life, a place to come home to after school, someone waiting, and a warm dinner on the table. Rachel was the woman who once made me believe that was enough. We met in our final year of college. She was majoring in psychology. I was in education. Rachel used to say she loved how I saw the world, how I wasn't caught up in the race for more, that I listened, that I made her feel safe. We got married less than 2 years into our first jobs. Back then, money was the last thing on our minds. We moved to the suburbs. Small house, 2 bedrooms, a front lawn with a baby maple tree we planted our first week. No kids, not because we didn't want them, but because we didn't feel financially ready. Still, every night Rachel would say, as long as we had each other, it was enough. And I believed her. I truly did. Things started to shift around our 6th year of marriage. Rachel got close to a group of neighborhood wives who called themselves the Ladies' League. They'd meet every Tuesday, rotating houses. It started off as coffee mornings, then turned into brunches, group shopping trips, spa days, even planning winter getaways together. At first, I didn't think much of it, but Rachel slowly began to change. She started commenting on how our house felt a bit small compared to others. She asked why I didn't consider tutoring on the side to make more money, or if I'd ever thought of switching to something more practical. I didn't see it clearly then. I figured she was just going through a phase. But looking back now, I think it all started with those Tuesday gatherings, those casual conversations around fancy dining tables, the offhand comparisons that, repeated enough, started planting little doubts. I didn't realize it at the time, but Rachel had already stopped looking at me the way she used to. If you've ever believed that love alone could hold a marriage together, maybe this story will make you think twice. And if any part of this hits close to home, feel free to leave a like or share it. Sometimes just knowing someone out there understands is enough. At first, it was just a bit uncomfortable, like being the odd one out at a party where everyone else had known each other for years. But over time, those Tuesday Ladies' League meetups started to feel like a test I was always failing. No one ever raised their voice. No one outright called me a failure. They were more subtle than that. Clara was the first to strike. She spoke like she was dissecting a contract, every word sharp, deliberate. One time I passed through the living room to grab a glass of water, and she looked at me, gave a soft little smile, then turned to Rachel and said how stressful teaching must be these days, with kids being so much harder to manage now. Her tone was soaked in pity, but laced with condescension. And Rachel, she just sipped her tea in silence. Then there was Tina, always full of helpful advice. She once told Rachel that her friend had to help guide her husband into a more financially smart career path, because honestly, teacher salaries in this state, not exactly built for a secure future. Rachel brought that comment home to me, followed by a casual, "Have you ever thought about switching fields? Just, to make life a little easier?" Erica loved to preach about success mindset. She'd go on about her husband's crypto ventures like she was quoting from a TED Talk. One time, she glanced my way and said, "Even teachers can invest, if they've got the right growth mindset." Jenna was more straightforward. She just asked questions. Short, harmless on the surface, but sharp enough to cut deep. Things like, does Kevin enjoy vacations? Or is he more of a save every penny type? Or has he considered going back to school to teach at the college level? I wasn't sitting at their table, but I heard every word. Those questions weren't for me. They were for Rachel. But I was the one being judged. What hurt the most wasn't what they said. It was looking over at Rachel and seeing her just sit there, not saying a word. Not looking at me. Not looking at them either. Just stirring her tea like nothing had been said that was worth responding to. One night, after everyone had gone home, I brought it up. I told her I felt disrespected, that I didn't need praise, but I wanted to be treated like a person, not a weekly talking point. She looked at me and said I was being too sensitive, that it's just how women talk among themselves. And if it bothered me that much, maybe I just shouldn't listen. I didn't say anything after that. I didn't want to fight. The house was so quiet, I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. But inside me, something had started to make noise. Faint, but steady. And it didn't stop. One Tuesday afternoon, I got hit with a migraine so bad I couldn't finish my classes. I asked the principal for permission to head home early. Just needed somewhere quiet to lie down for a bit. What I'd forgotten was that it was Tuesday. Ladies' League Day. As soon as I opened the front door, I heard voices and laughter coming from the living room. The scent of lavender candles, the soft clinking of spoons and porcelain mugs, and Clara's voice, mid-story about her husband's recent business trip to New York. I greeted everyone, tried to be polite, even though my head felt like someone was hammering inside it. They paused for maybe 1 second to nod at me, then went right back to their conversation. I meant to grab a glass of water and head upstairs, but I couldn't help overhearing them, because they assumed I was already gone. Clara let out a dramatic sigh and said how teaching must be such a chill job. No travel, no deadlines, no clients, no contracts. Then she turned to Rachel and joked, "I bet Kevin doesn't know what it's like to get woken up by a client at 2 a.m., huh?" Tina chimed in about how her husband had 4 board meetings that week, on top of managing a brand new showroom. He's so busy, most nights he barely has time to eat a single salad before jumping on another call. She said it like she was describing a war hero. Then I heard Erica's soft laugh. She said real men are the busy ones, the ones with vision, with goals. Then added, "Not everyone's built for that kind of pressure. But I guess Kevin doesn't have to be. He teaches English. It's not like he's fighting for anything." That line made me freeze at the foot of the stairs. I was holding my water, but I wasn't thirsty anymore. I don't know if Rachel said anything, but I didn't hear a single word that sounded like defense. No one stood up for me. There was only the sound of a spoon tapping gently against a cup. Steady, emotionless. I went upstairs, shut the door as quietly as I could. I lay down on the bed, blanket over my eyes, head still pounding. But now, my chest felt cold. It was the kind of cold that doesn't come from pain, but from clarity. The clarity of knowing you're not hated, but you're not respected either. You're just there, like some decor piece on a shelf, not impressive enough to admire, not broken enough to throw away. Just something they walk past each week without ever really seeing. One Tuesday, I deliberately stayed late at school. I knew it was Ladies' League Day. Usually, I'd find an excuse to be somewhere else, but this time, I just wanted to see if they'd still be there if I came home later than usual. I walked through the door around 4:30, hoping the house would be quiet. But no. The sound of laughter greeted me the moment I stepped in. Same voices, same setup. Women in a circle in the living room, teacups on the glass table, and the smell of cinnamon pastries filling the house like some boutique cafe downtown. I gave them a polite nod. Rachel glanced at me, then turned right back to the conversation. My stomach was growling. I hadn't eaten since morning, so I went to the kitchen, pulled out some bread and cold cuts, and made myself a simple sandwich. My hands were busy, but my ears were tuned to every word. Clara was talking about an upcoming charity gala, a black tie event she and her husband were attending to raise funds for a medical foundation. She mentioned a new dress she'd had tailored in New York, and the modest donation her husband made just to make sure their name would be printed in the program. Jenna jumped in, saying this year's gala was going to attract a lot of celebrities, so their donation had to match the crowd. Her husband had written a 5-figure check. Not to show off, she said, just to lead by example. I heard Erica laugh softly and then add, "Of course, not everyone can afford to be part of events like that. Some people just have different priorities, I guess." Right then, I walked out into the living room with my sandwich. Maria looked at me, smiled, not kindly, and said, "Sometimes I envy people with simple lives. No big responsibilities, no financial stress, no pressure to perform. Must be peaceful." Her voice was gentle, but her words drew a line, clear and sharp, between them and me. Tina nodded and said, "Exactly. Some people are born to carry weight, others to live quietly." Nothing wrong with that, just different roles. I stood there, sandwich in hand, eyes on Rachel. She smiled, but not the kind of smile that says, "I've got your back." It was the kind that made me feel like a stranger in my own home. And then she said, "Sometimes I do wonder what life would have been like if I married someone a little more ambitious." Her voice was soft, playful almost, but no one in that room took it as a joke. Erica leaned in like a snake sensing blood. She told Rachel she was smart, beautiful, that she could have had anyone. Then she asked, "Do you ever think, if you'd made different choices, maybe things would have turned out differently?" Silence. Everyone looked at Rachel. Rachel looked at me. She paused, then said, "I try not to think like that. It's not fair to compare. But, yeah. Sometimes I wonder, if I'd ended up with someone who could offer more chances, more experiences, maybe things would have been different." I don't know how I swallowed that bite of sandwich. My throat felt like sandpaper. It was like they were dissecting a failed product, and I was the thing that didn't make the cut. Jenna sealed it with, "Modern women need partners who can walk beside them, spiritually, ambitiously, with shared vision. That's all there is to it." Clara nodded. It's hard to grow when the person next to you is content with mediocrity. And Tina, like always, added the final touch. "Life's short. If you know what you want, don't settle for less." I stood there and listened as they dissected my life in front of my wife, and she didn't stop them. She didn't defend me. She didn't disagree. In fact, she joined in. Something inside me cracked that day, and to this day, it still hasn't healed. If you've made it this far, thank you. Every subscribe is a quiet nod that says these real-life stories matter. That slow, quiet heartbreaks deserve to be heard too. I held it in for too long. Week after week, I swallowed little jabs, sideways glances, half smirks masked as jokes. I stopped knowing whether I was angry at what they said, or more at the silence of the woman who once held my hand at the altar and promised to stand by me. That night, I waited until Rachel finished the dishes, then sat down at the kitchen table. I didn't want to raise my voice. I just wanted to talk like two people who once loved each other, with honesty, without defense. I told her I didn't want to become a punchline in my own home, that if she saw me as a burden, she could just say it outright. I could take the truth, but I couldn't keep enduring the feeling of being judged by people who didn't live my life, and worse, being silently offered up for judgment by the person who was supposed to be on my side. I asked her if she really saw me the way they did. Did she think I was someone who settled, who lacked ambition, who wasn't worth being proud of? Rachel stayed quiet. One hand rested on the table, the other lightly gripping the rim of her glass. She didn't answer right away, just let out a slow breath and said I was overreacting. That women joke with each other like that I shouldn't take it so seriously. But her eyes told a different story. They didn't look at me. They looked somewhere else, like something inside her had surfaced, and she didn't want to admit it even to herself. Then she started to talk. She said she'd been thinking a lot about money, about the future. She said maybe I could consider picking up extra work, a second job, maybe even a new path. She brought up crypto, mentioned how Erica's husband knew the field well and could help me if I wanted. I stayed quiet, arms resting on the table. I didn't feel angry exactly. I felt hollow. Like everything I'd built all these years, those late nights grading papers, the summers spent planning lessons, had somehow become meaningless. Not enough to earn respect, not even from the one person I thought I never had to prove myself to. I told her, if she truly wanted a different life, a better one, then instead of spending her time gossiping, brunching, and shopping with people who constantly drove wedges between us, maybe she could try saving more. Maybe find a job herself. Don't throw all the responsibility on one person, and then look down on that person for not turning life into a luxury package. I said it like a stone tossed in water, not to hurt, but to remind her, I'm not an ATM, and I'm not some blank slate she can project someone else's ambitions onto. Rachel went quiet. Then, her voice came out shaky but firm. She said those husbands didn't start with everything either. They built from nothing, but they had vision. They knew what they wanted, and they reached for it. Me? I'd always been content with stable. She said, now I expected her to work too. That it felt like I was telling her I couldn't take care of my own wife. I didn't reply. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew, if I said one more thing, everything might break for good. So I just sat there, staring at the lone coffee spoon left on the table. Silence was the only thing I could offer that might keep the pieces from completely falling apart. But inside, I knew. The trust was cracking. And this time it wasn't just a surface scratch, it was breaking into pieces. The peak of it all, the moment that made everything unmistakably clear, came on a quiet autumn weekend. The air was crisp, the sky clear. I had plans to meet up with an old friend, Andrew, someone I hadn't seen since college, over a decade. We picked a new Italian place downtown, one of those cozy spots with soft lighting, tall windows, and tree-lined sidewalks bathed in golden streetlight. Before leaving the house, I asked Rachel if she wanted to come. It was just a casual dinner, nothing formal, and honestly, we hadn't been out together in a while. I thought maybe she'd like that. She was standing in front of the mirror, choosing earrings. She shook her head and said she already had plans. With the girls, their usual meetup. She told me to enjoy my evening. I nodded. Didn't think much of it. I didn't even register how carefully she'd done her makeup. I got to the restaurant right on time, chose a small table near the window. From there, I could see the street, the early evening light catching the sidewalk in soft flickers. 15 minutes later, they walked in. Rachel's Ladies' League. No Rachel. They took a corner table, ordered wine, and began chatting away. I kept my head down, hoping they wouldn't spot me. Seemed like they didn't. I was a little thrown, but I focused on catching up with Andrew. Still, every few seconds my eyes drifted toward the window. Habit, maybe. Or something deeper. About half an hour later, a luxury car pulled up across the street. One of those cars you don't even need to see the logo to know it costs more than a few years of a teacher's salary. A man in a tailored suit stepped out and walked around to open the passenger door. And that's when I saw her. Rachel stepped out, elegant as ever. Form-fitting dress, heels, flawless makeup, a bouquet of flowers in hand. She looked radiant, like she was headed into a first date. Her face lit up, and she looked at him with a warmth I hadn't seen in a long time. They linked arms, smiling as they walked toward the restaurant. I didn't see much more, but I saw enough. Inside, I caught sight of her friends. The moment they spotted the two of them, the whispers started. Clara leaned in, laughing softly with Erica. Jenna tapped Tina on the shoulder, eyes sparkling with a kind of smug satisfaction. I stayed in my seat, ate what was left on my plate, took small sips of water, just enough to keep my hands steady. Andrew was mid-story about switching careers, and I nodded along, adding the occasional comment, trying my best to sound present. To keep things light, to keep him from noticing that I'd left the conversation the moment she stepped out of that car. I didn't mention what I saw. Didn't say that just a few feet away, my wife was sitting with another man, a fresh bouquet still in her lap. No one needed to know. About 30 minutes later, I checked my watch and said I had to leave early. School stuff in the morning. Andrew shook my hand, said he hoped we'd catch up again soon. I smiled and nodded, hoping he didn't notice the hollowness behind my eyes. Outside, I walked a few blocks before calling a ride. The streets looked darker than usual. The streetlights stretched long shadows across the pavement. When I got home, I slipped off my shoes, turned on the kitchen light. That soft yellow glow I used to love. It felt different now. I wasn't hungry. I just stood there for a while, then quietly opened my laptop. I pulled up an old email, a contact I'd saved from a law office, just in case, a precaution I never thought I'd need. I typed only a few sentences, short, direct, but every word felt like it sealed shut the last door on something that once meant everything. I was ironing a shirt I'd set aside for tomorrow's meeting with the lawyer when I heard the front door open downstairs. The click of heels against the wood floor echoed through the quiet. Light, even, almost carefree. Rachel walked in, glowing like she'd just come back from an 18th birthday party. Her lipstick still fresh, her hair pinned up with just enough softness to look effortlessly perfect. She had her purse in one hand, and I figured the bouquet had either been left in the car or handed off to someone else. As she slipped off her coat, she started humming, lightly, aimlessly, like someone entirely pleased with how their night had gone. I made my way to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of tea, and sat on the sofa. Rachel walked over and asked, in the most cheerful voice, "How was your dinner? Did you have a good time?" I nodded, voice steady. "Yeah, it was fine." She smiled, didn't press further, didn't notice anything. Or maybe she'd just gotten used to my silence on nights when I was too drained to pretend. She stepped into the kitchen, popped open a soda from the fridge, leaned casually against the counter, and pulled out her phone. Her fingers danced across the screen like she was flipping through a few photos from earlier that evening. I sat there, hands resting on my lap, saying nothing. The house looked no different than usual. Warm lighting, the soft scent of lavender drifting from the diffuser, the dishwasher humming faintly in the background. Everything felt calm, too calm. Only I knew that in that exact moment, something fundamental had cracked beneath the surface, the kind of break you don't hear, but feel. Rachel stood there, blissfully unaware. She didn't notice that this house, brick by brick, memory by memory, every little corner I had fought to protect, was quietly beginning to split apart. And maybe she never would. Because the moment I truly stepped out of this marriage was the moment she smiled the most. Monday morning, I took the day off and went to the lawyer's office as scheduled. The sky was overcast but dry. I wore the outfit I'd laid out the night before. My hands weren't shaking, but there was a weight in my chest, like I was about to sign something I couldn't come back from. I sat across from the lawyer, a man in his 50s with a calm voice and eyes that didn't judge. He told me to take my time. So I did. For nearly 2 hours, I talked. I told him about Tuesday evenings, the so-called ladies' league, about all the half-jokes that weren't really jokes, the cutting looks dressed up as casual conversation, about feeling small in my own home, about the time Rachel laughed and said she sometimes wondered what life would have been like if she'd married someone more ambitious, and about that night when I saw my wife walk into a restaurant, arm in arm with another man, while her friends giggled like they'd just watched a romantic comedy. The lawyer didn't interrupt, just listened, like someone who'd heard his share of broken stories but hadn't grown numb to them. When I finished, he leaned back and said what I'd described, from the dismissal, the isolation, to the quiet replacement, was emotional abuse. He called it a psychological campaign, led by Rachel's friends and enabled by Rachel herself. We didn't have kids, not much property, just the small house in the suburbs, a few modest savings accounts. But he said I'd still need to go through the full legal process, filing, formal notice, and possibly mediation if Rachel pushed back. I nodded. Then I signed the paperwork he'd prepared. My name in the upper left, hers in the upper right. I looked at that page for a moment. It didn't hurt like I thought it would. There was only a quiet clarity, the kind that comes when you've walked all the way to the edge of your pain, and there's nothing left but truth. He said the documents would be served to Rachel within a few days. I didn't ask anything else. There was nothing left to say. It was time to put down a period, not to end love, but to end the endurance. I got home before 3 p.m. I thought the house would be quiet, but the moment I opened the door, I heard familiar laughter from the living room, the scent of jasmine tea, the soft clink of spoons against porcelain, and the echo of voices bouncing around the space I once considered my safe place. They'd changed the schedule, from Tuesday to Monday. Maybe it was a coincidence, maybe it wasn't. Either way, there they were again, Clara, Tina, Erica, Jenna, like some unofficial tribunal, always ready to dissect someone else's life. But this time was different. They didn't wait for me to go upstairs. They didn't avoid eye contact or whisper behind cups of tea. Jenna was the first to speak. She looked me dead in the eye and said Rachel was a remarkable woman, and she deserved a partner who matched her intellectually and had equal potential, that they felt Rachel was being held back, not able to fully thrive in this marriage. I stood by the door, keys still in hand, face unreadable. Tina continued, saying that as Rachel's close friends, they'd encouraged her, multiple times, to really think about what she wanted in life. And maybe it was time for her to ask herself if she was truly with the right person. Erica nodded along. She said Rachel was still young, still sharp, and shouldn't waste the best years of her life just maintaining a version of happiness that no longer made her feel alive. I turned to Rachel. She was sitting on the couch, hands clasped in her lap, staring at them like they might disappear if she just stayed quiet long enough. But she didn't speak. I waited. A part of me still hoped she'd say something. Anything. Enough. Or, this is between us. But no. Nothing. Clara leaned forward and said they could all see it. That look in Rachel's eyes. That quiet discontent. That she was too kind to say it out loud. But they knew she needed more. More than what I was giving her. Tina leaned back in her seat and said Rachel had told them she felt stuck. That sometimes she wondered if she had settled too early by marrying me. It didn't feel like a punch to the gut. It felt like being slowly, methodically cut open, and realizing the person you loved was standing by, letting it happen. I looked straight at Rachel, and for the first time, I asked directly, "Did you really say those things to them?" She started to cry. Her voice came out small and broken. She said things were complicated, that there were times she felt lost, disappointed, that maybe she had said some things she shouldn't have said. Erica placed a hand on Rachel's shoulder and said Rachel just wanted to live up to her full potential, that I, being a stable man, couldn't really challenge or expand her world in the way she hoped. At that point, I stopped feeling anything at all. It was like something inside me just shut off. I looked around the room. At the pillows, the paintings, the little pieces we picked out together. And now? The same room had turned into a boardroom where they discussed my life like a failed startup. I asked one last time, "Is that really how you see me, Rachel? That I'm beneath you? That I'm the reason your life feels so small and ordinary?" She didn't answer right away, and when she did, she didn't look at me. She said it wasn't about who was above or below, just that we were in different places now. And maybe it was time we both got honest about that. Clara chimed in, like she was wrapping up a meeting. Said no one was at fault, just growth, just distance. That Rachel was still young enough to start over. That I too deserved someone who truly saw me. I looked at them for a long moment. Then I said, voice calm and steady, "I think I've heard enough." I stood still for a moment, my eyes moving slowly across the room, taking in each of them. Well-dressed women, sitting perfectly upright, fingers resting delicately on teacups, mouths full of polished words like freedom, growth, and evolving in different directions. Then I looked at Rachel, still staring at her hands, fingers twisted tightly together like she was trying to hold back tears that didn't want to wait. And I said, voice low but steady, "Well then, good. Because I just came back from the lawyer's office. I filed for divorce this morning." No one said a word. Rachel looked up, her eyes frozen for a beat. Not shocked, not even exactly hurt. Just stunned, like someone hearing a truth they hadn't fully prepared to face. I added, "Looks like I'm finally doing what you and your personal life advisory board have been gently nudging toward." I let out a short, tired laugh. Not bitter, just worn out with a hint of irony. I mean, really, with such a high-level summit of intelligence, grace, and raw potential assembled here, I suppose I never stood a chance. Still, no one spoke. Clara pressed her lips together. Erica glanced at Rachel, then lowered her eyes to her cup. Jenna blinked fast like she'd just swallowed a sentence she couldn't quite finish. And Rachel, she didn't cry. But something in her, something important, fell apart right then and there. I kept going. "If I'm being fair, I should actually thank all of you, especially for the effort you put into arranging such a lovely evening for my wife, and the man you clearly believe is a more suitable match." I turned toward Rachel, looked her in the eyes, but not with hatred, just clarity. It's not every day you find friends generous enough to not only critique your marriage, but also take the liberty of pre-screening potential replacements. Then I gave a small final nod. "Thank you, ladies. I'll be stepping away from this little potential development strategy of yours so you can move forward uninterrupted." That night, I went upstairs. No slamming doors, no shouting. I just pulled the suitcase from under the bed and started folding my clothes. Shirts to the left, sleepwear to the right. A few books I liked reading before bed. I didn't pack much, just enough for a few days. I planned to stay at my brother's place, just long enough not to have to see a face I no longer trusted, or share this house with shadows I no longer recognized as mine. I left just before midnight. Rachel didn't ask where I was going. 3 days later, she received the divorce papers. I knew because around noon that day my phone rang. Her name lit up on the screen, for the first time in what felt like forever. I answered. On the other end was the sound of sobbing, raw, unfiltered, not performative, not dramatic, just panic wrapped in despair. "Why would you go this far?" she choked out. "It was just one dinner. I didn't even cross any lines. Can't we at least talk about this?" She paused, voice breaking. "We could try therapy. We could still fix this. Can't you just think about it?" I was quiet for a few seconds. Then I spoke, slow, steady. "You're just now starting to cry, but I've been quiet for a very long time." On the other end, I heard nothing but the sound of her breathing, shaky, broken, but no words came. And then I left her with just one sentence, like a door gently left ajar, but never again to be walked back through. "I'm calm enough to walk away. Are you brave enough to look at yourself?" I didn't say anything else. I didn't hang up right away either. I just let the silence sit there, long enough for her to understand it wasn't that I never tried. It's that she never heard me when I needed her to listen the most. And sometimes, a marriage doesn't end with a scream. It ends with a silence so long no one can hear each other anymore. After that final call, I didn't say anything else. Rachel tried to reach out a few more times over the next week. A few short texts, one long emotional email, scattered apologies mixed with questions like, "Does it really have to go this far? And can't you reconsider?" But I didn't respond. Not out of anger. Just because everything she needed to hear, I'd already said. I'd said it with months of silence, with every time I swallowed my hurt, with the look in my eyes the night her friends picked apart my life like it was some failed business pitch. We went to court not long after. Everything moved quickly. No objections, no drama. Neither of us wanted to drag it out. Within 3 months, the divorce was finalized. No one cried. No one asked the other to stay. We just sat there, across from each other, quiet, distant, like two people who once knew everything, now reduced to signatures and silence. Then came the house, the only thing left between us. It wasn't much, but enough to bring us to one last conversation. I told her I didn't want it. I didn't want to live in a place where I had once felt so small. She borrowed money from her parents and bought me out of my share. It wasn't hard. Maybe for her, holding on to that house was the last way to convince herself she hadn't lost everything. I moved out a few weeks later, into a small apartment near the school. 1 bedroom, old wooden floors, a window that looked out onto a shared yard where kids played each afternoon. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Mornings got quieter. I'd wake up early, make coffee, read a few pages from an old book. No one compared me to someone else's husband. No backhanded comments wrapped in kindness. No sound of heels pacing on hardwood floors. Just stillness. And me, in a version of myself that didn't have to keep trying to be enough for someone else. About a year later, I heard something. Rachel and the man she'd had dinner with, they broke up. No scandal, no fallout, just didn't turn out the way she imagined. Her little circle broke apart too. Clara moved out of state, Erica ran into financial trouble. Jessica separated from her husband. And Rachel? I heard she pulled away from everyone. Lives alone now. Freelances, rarely goes out. I didn't feel happy when I heard that. I didn't feel sad either. It passed through me like a news report on the radio. Something distant, no longer tied to me. I just kept living. I'm still teaching. Still the middle-aged English teacher in a slightly wrinkled shirt, eating a simple lunch, speaking with a voice calm enough to help his students focus. No one calls me unambitious anymore. And more importantly, I'm no longer trying to prove anything. Life feels lighter now, not because I won, but because I let go at the right time. Someone once asked me, if she came back, would you forgive her? I just smiled and said, I was calm enough to walk away. Were you brave enough to face yourself? And maybe that's all there is. If this story made you think about silence, self-worth, or the quiet places where love phrase, feel free to leave a comment or share it with someone who might need it. You never know. It could be the exact wake-up call someone's been waiting for.